Robert Hayes hadn't planned on crying that Tuesday morning. But when he stopped at kennel number 7, the German Shepherd puppy inside went absolutely still, then erupted in a sound Robert had only heard once before. Not a bark. A scream. A wail of recognition so raw, so desperate, that 3 shelter staff came running. The puppy threw himself against the chain-link door with such force Jennifer Martinez thought he'd break through it. His paws scraped frantically at the metal, claws screeching, body trembling with something that looked like grief? No. Reunion. Robert's hand was already on the latch. "Sir, wait," Jennifer started, but she stopped when she saw Robert's face. Pale. Frozen. His lips forming a single word he couldn't get out. The puppy knew him. And Robert. Robert knew that dog. But that was impossible. Because Scout, his Scout, had been gone for 8 months. Rehomed. Safe somewhere with a family who could actually care for him, unlike Robert, who'd collapsed in his kitchen with a widowmaker heart attack 3 days after burying his wife. Scout couldn't be here. Locked in a county shelter. Alone. Abandoned. Could he? The puppy's eyes never left Robert's face. Amber. Desperate. Pleading. Jennifer's hand hovered over her radio. She'd seen a lot of reunions in her 12 years at the shelter, but this was different. This was recognition between souls. She glanced at the intake sheet clipped to the kennel door. Surrendered 6 weeks ago. Listed as stray found wandering. No chip registered. No previous owner. Lies. Every single word on that form was a lie, and Jennifer suddenly knew it. "Do you know this dog?" she asked quietly. Robert's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "His name is Scout. Before we begin, if you love dogs, if you've ever lost someone you couldn't imagine living without, you need to hear this story. But I'm warning you now, grab tissues, silence your phone, and whatever you do, don't stop watching halfway through. The twist at the 15-minute mark will completely change everything you thought you knew. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss stories like this, because what happened when Robert walked into that shelter, it's something you'll never forget." 11 months earlier, Margaret Hayes had smiled through the morphine haze and said, "I want to hold something alive, Robert. Something that still has a future." The hospice nurse had warned them about end-of-life decisions, about taking on responsibilities they couldn't sustain. But Margaret wasn't asking for much anymore. Just this. A puppy. Something warm and hopeful to fill the hours between pain medication doses. Scout had been 8 weeks old when Robert carried him through the door, all oversized paws and velvet ears. Margaret had wept, actually wept with joy, pressing her face into his fur. For 3 months, that puppy became her world. He learned to be gentle with her 4 lines, to curl carefully against her frail body, to sense when she needed silence and when she needed his cold nose pressed to her palm. When Margaret died, Scout howled. Not barked, howled. A sound of pure loss. Robert had understood completely. They grieved together, man and dog, in the too-quiet house that still smelled like illness and lavender lotion. Robert would wake at 3 a.m. to find Scout pressed against his side, shaking. They'd sit on the back porch until dawn, neither of them sleeping, both of them broken. Then came the heart attack. Robert didn't remember falling. Didn't remember the ambulance or Patricia's tear-streaked face in the ICU. He remembered waking up to tubes and monitors and his daughter's careful voice saying, "Dad, I found Scout a good home. A family with kids and a yard." "You can't," she'd faltered. "You can't take care of him anymore." Robert had been too weak to argue. Too medicated to fight. He'd never even said goodbye. Now, 8 months later, standing in front of Kennel 7, Robert understood the full weight of what his daughter had done, and how catastrophically it had failed. "He's been here 6 weeks, Jennifer said, pulling up Scout's file on her tablet. "Came in severely depressed. Wouldn't eat for the first 9 days. We had to hand-feed him. Dr. Chun actually flagged him for behavioral euthanasia evaluation because he showed no interest in anything." Robert's hand was inside the kennel now, Scout licking his fingers with frantic intensity, whimpering continuously. "Who surrendered him?" Robert's voice had gone hard. "Military." The tone that meant someone had made a terrible mistake. Jennifer hesitated. "It's marked anonymous drop-off. They said he was a stray, but..." She gestured at Scout, who had pressed his entire body against the kennel door, trying to get closer to Robert, eyes never leaving the old man's face. "That's not a stray. That's a dog who knows exactly who you are." Dr. Amanda Chun appeared at Jennifer's shoulder, alerted by the commotion. She watched Scout for exactly 10 seconds before speaking. "Trauma bonded. Severe separation anxiety. Probably secondary abandonment after primary loss." She looked at Robert. "Who did he lose?" "My wife," Robert said quietly. "Margaret. She died almost a year ago. And then he lost you." It wasn't a question. Dr. Chun could read the story in both their eyes, the dog's desperate fixation, the man's guilt-stricken recognition. My daughter. Robert started, then stopped. What could he say? Patricia meant well? She thought she was helping? None of that mattered now. What mattered was the puppy in Kennel 7 who'd been abandoned twice, who'd waited in this place believing no one was coming, who'd stopped eating because what was the point of survival without love? I want him back, Robert said. Dr. Chun exchanged a look with Jennifer. Sir, do you have documentation proving ownership? Vet records, photos, anything? Robert pulled out his phone with shaking hands. The photos were still there, Margaret in her hospital bed, Scout curled against her side. Scout as a tiny puppy in Robert's lap. Margaret's final birthday, her hand resting on Scout's head, both of them looking at the camera. Jennifer's eyes went bright with tears. Oh my God. Can I take him home? Robert's voice broke on the last word. Please. He's already lost everything. Don't make him lose me again. That's when Carol Williams, the shelter director, appeared. And that's when things got complicated. Mr. Hayes, I understand this is emotional, but we have protocols. Carol's voice was kind but firm. Professional. She'd been doing this job for 23 years, she couldn't let feelings override policy. Scout was surrendered legally. Without proof of ownership, microchip, license, documented vet records in your name, we can't just release him. He's mine. Robert's hand was still in the kennel, Scout pressing his face against it, breathing hard. On paper, he's not. On paper, he was found as a stray 6 weeks ago. Carol pulled up the surrender form on Jennifer's tablet. Says here he was picked up on Highway 49, no collar, no identification. The person who surrendered him signed an affidavit stating they had no knowledge of previous ownership. That's a lie, Robert said flatly. Maybe. But proving that requires. Mrs. Williams. Dr. Chun's voice cut through the tension. Look at them. Everyone did. Scout had gone quiet now, utterly focused on Robert's face, reading every micro-expression, every shift in breathing. When Robert moved his hand slightly to the left, Scout's head followed. When Robert's eyes watered, Scout's ears flattened in distress. It was synchronization so complete it looked choreographed. That's not a dog who found a stranger, Dr. Chun continued. That's a dog who found his person. I've been a vet for 15 years. I know the difference. Carol sighed. She knew it too. But knowing and proving were different things, and the shelter had been sued before by people claiming wrongful adoption denials. Mr. Hayes, do you have any veterinary records? Anything with Scout's name and your name together? Robert's face fell. His vet was Dr. Singh at Riverbend Animal Clinic. But all the appointments, they were under Margaret's name. My wife's name. She handled everything with, he stopped. Swallowed. After she died, I was going to transfer Scout's records, but then I had the heart attack, and Patricia rehomed him, Jennifer finished quietly. Where did she rehome him? Carol asked. If we can contact that family, get documentation of the transfer. I don't know. Robert's voice was barely audible. I was in the hospital. Patricia just told me she'd found him a good home. She said it was better if I didn't know where. Easier for both of us to move on. Carol rubbed her temples. This was a mess. A heartbreaking, legally complicated mess. I can prove he's mine, Robert said suddenly. Watch. He pulled his hand back from the kennel. Scout whined in protest. Then Robert spoke, his voice clear and commanding. Scout. Honor guard. Scout's entire body shifted. He sat up straight, perfectly still, head high, eyes forward. Military posture. Absolute discipline. At ease. Scout relaxed but remained focused. Scout. Find comfort. The puppy moved to the corner of his kennel where a threadbare blanket lay crumpled. He circled it 3 times, always 3, then lay down with his nose pointed toward Robert. Jennifer's mouth had fallen open. Those are custom commands. I trained him, Robert said quietly. During Margaret's last months. Honor guard meant sit still during her medical procedures. Find comfort meant give her space but stay close. His voice fractured. I taught him how to love someone who was dying. Carol closed her eyes. Deep breath. Mr. Hayes, I believe you. I absolutely believe you. But belief isn't enough for our legal department. If we release Scout to you and someone else comes forward claiming ownership. No one else is coming, Dr. Chun interrupted. Because no one else loved him enough to keep him. The words hung in the air, sharp and true. Carol looked at the file again. Then at Scout. Then at Robert Hayes, this 67-year-old veteran with grief etched into every line of his face. Give me 24 hours, she finally said. I'll contact Dr. Singh, verify the vet records, and see what I can do about pushing this through as a reclaim rather than an adoption. In the meantime, Mr. Hayes, you should probably call your daughter. Robert's expression went cold. Yeah, I probably should. Patricia answered on the third ring. Dad? Are you okay? Where did you take Scout? Robert's voice was ice. Silence. Long, painful. Dad, we talked about this. You couldn't. Where did you take my dog, Patricia? Another silence. Then, quieter, the Hendersons. They live in Maple Grove. They have 2 kids and a big yard and they seemed really nice. Call them. Right now. Ask them where Scout is. What? Dad, I don't understand. Call them. Patricia must have heard something in his voice, the barely restrained fury of a man who'd been betrayed by someone he trusted. Hold on, she whispered. Robert waited, his free hand clenched so tight his nails cut into his palm. Jennifer and Dr. Chun had retreated a respectful distance, but Carol stayed close, watching. 3 minutes later, Patricia came back on the line. Her voice was shaking. They said Scout wouldn't adjust. He stopped eating. Wouldn't let the kids near him. They tried for 2 months, but he was getting worse, so they took him to a shelter. They didn't tell me because they felt bad, and her voice broke. Oh God, Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. He's been here for 6 weeks, Robert said quietly. Alone. Depressed. They almost euthanized him. Patricia made a sound like she'd been punched. He didn't stop eating because he was adjusting, Patricia. He stopped eating because he'd already lost Margaret, then me, and then you gave him away like he was furniture. Like he didn't matter. Like grief is something you can just fix by removing the problem. Dad, I thought I was helping. You weren't. The line went quiet except for Patricia's ragged breathing. I'm bringing him home, Robert said. And if you ever make a decision about my life without asking me again, we're done. Do you understand? Yes, Patricia whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Robert hung up. Carol cleared her throat gently. Mr. Hayes, there's something you should know. Our adoption policy has a health screening requirement. Given your recent cardiac event? Robert's jaw tightened. You're saying I can't have him. I'm saying we need to evaluate whether a dying man should be allowed to love his dog? Robert's voice was sharp. Bitter. Let me save you the evaluation, Mrs. Williams. My cardiologist gives me 2 years, maybe 3 if I'm lucky and careful. I've got a defibrillator implanted and a pill organizer that looks like a tackle box. I'm not a good adoption candidate. I know that. He looked through the kennel at Scout, who was watching him with absolute trust, absolute certainty that Robert would fix this. But that dog loved my wife until her last breath. He deserves the same loyalty in return. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let some policy tell me I'm too broken to give him a home when he's just as broken as I am. Pause. We belong together. Both of us damaged. Both of us grieving. But still here. Still trying. Carol looked at Dr. Chun, who nodded slowly. Foster to adopt, Dr. Chun said suddenly. Medical necessity exemption. Carol's eyebrows rose. You want to classify this as therapy? Why not? Scout's demonstrating severe trauma responses. Mr. Hayes is demonstrating grief-related isolation. Reunification serves a medical purpose for both parties. We document it properly, get his cardiologist to sign off on the therapeutic benefits of pet ownership, and process it as a special case foster that converts to adoption after 90 days if all parties remain stable. Carol thought about it. Then, slowly, she smiled. You know what? That might actually work. The paperwork took 4 hours. Robert had to sign liability waivers, medical disclosures, and emergency contact forms. He had to agree to weekly check-ins with Jennifer for the first month, bi-weekly vet visits with Dr. Chun, and a home safety inspection within 72 hours. He would have signed anything. Would have promised anything. When they finally opened Kennel 7, Scout didn't run. He walked out slowly, carefully, like he was afraid this was a dream that sudden movement might shatter. He went directly to Robert, sat at his feet, and looked up with an expression that broke everyone in the room. Don't leave me again, those eyes said. Please. I can't survive it twice. Robert knelt, ignoring the protest in his knees, the flutter in his chest, and wrapped both arms around Scout's neck. The puppy pressed his face into Robert's shoulder and made that sound again. Not a bark. Not a whine. Something deeper. Recognition. Home. I've got you, Robert whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've got you now. Jennifer handed Robert a folder of paperwork and a small bag of Scout's belongings, the threadbare blanket from his kennel, a rubber ball no one had seen him play with, and a collar that looked new. This came with him when he was surrendered, she said, holding up the collar. It's the only thing that wasn't on the intake form. We kept it just in case. Robert took it. Basic nylon, nothing special, except. His blood went cold. There was a tag attached. Not a typical ID tag. A rabies vaccination tag from Riverbend Animal Clinic, dated 4 months after Margaret's death. After Patricia had supposedly rehomed Scout to the Hendersons. When did the Hendersons get him? Robert asked slowly. Jennifer pulled up her notes from the phone call. Mrs. Henderson said Patricia brought Scout to them 8 months ago, right after your heart attack. This vaccine was administered 4 months after that. Everyone went still. So someone took him to the vet, Dr. Chun said carefully. Someone who cared enough to keep his shots current. The Hendersons told Patricia they'd tried for 2 months before giving up, Robert continued, his mind racing. That means there's a 6-month gap between when they surrendered Scout and when he ended up here. 6 months. Where was he? Jennifer pulled up the intake record again, scanning it with new eyes. The surrender form says he was found on Highway 49. That's 40 miles from Maple Grove. Why would he be out there? Carol leaned over her shoulder. Anonymous drop-off. Cash payment for the surrender fee. No contact information. Almost like someone didn't want to be traced. Or didn't want Scout to be traced back to his real owner, Dr. Chun added. Robert's hands were shaking now. Not from his heart condition. From rage. Someone took him. After the Hendersons gave him up, someone kept him for 6 months, kept him vaccinated, kept him alive, and then dumped him here under a false name to make sure he couldn't be found. But why? Jennifer whispered. That's when Robert remembered. Patricia's voice on the phone, they didn't tell me because they felt bad. The Hendersons had felt bad. Guilty. So guilty they hadn't even told Patricia they'd gotten rid of Scout. Which meant Patricia didn't know Scout was gone. Which meant she still thought he was safely living in Maple Grove. Which meant whoever had taken Scout had never told anyone. I need to make another phone call, Robert said quietly. This time, Robert called Dr. Singh at Riverbend Animal Clinic. It took 20 minutes of explaining, verification, and being put on hold, but finally, the receptionist came back with records. We do show a visit for Scout Hayes 4 months ago. Rabies booster and wellness check. Who brought him in? A pause. Keyboard clicking. It says here, Patricia Hayes. Your daughter. Robert closed his eyes. The phone felt heavy in his hand. But that doesn't make sense, the receptionist continued. Because the address on file is, it's not Maple Grove. It's 447 Cedarwood Lane. Isn't that my address? Robert finished. His voice sounded distant. Hollow. That's my house. After he hung up, Robert sat in the shelter's parking lot with Scout in the passenger seat, trying to piece together what had happened. Patricia had brought Scout to the vet 4 months ago. To Robert's own vet. Using Robert's address. Which meant she'd known the Hendersons had given Scout up. Known Scout was back in her possession. And she'd never told Robert. For 4 months, Scout had been somewhere in Patricia's care, and then, 6 weeks ago, he'd ended up here. Surrendered as a stray. Abandoned. Why? Robert's phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Dad, can we talk? Please? I need to explain. He didn't respond. Instead, he drove home, or tried to. Halfway there, his chest tightened. Not a heart attack, just the warning that preceded one. The flutter. The pressure. The reminder that his body was a ticking clock winding down. He pulled over, breathing carefully, waiting for it to pass. Scout put his paw on Robert's leg. Gentle. Worried. I'm okay, Robert whispered. I'm okay. But he wasn't. And Scout knew it. When the episode passed, Robert sat there for a long time, watching the afternoon light fade through the windshield. His daughter had lied to him. Had kept Scout hidden. Had eventually discarded him so thoroughly that Scout had ended up in a shelter, nameless and alone, almost euthanized. And Robert's own body was failing. Failing fast. What happens to Scout when I'm gone? The question he'd been avoiding since the moment he recognized that face in Kennel 7. What happens when I die and there's no one left who loves him? Robert looked at Scout, who was watching him with complete trust, complete devotion. This puppy who'd been abandoned twice. Who'd been lied about and displaced and left to rot in a concrete kennel. Who'd stopped eating because grief had taken everything from him except the faint hope that maybe, someday, someone would come back. I won't leave you, Robert said out loud. Even if I die, I won't leave you alone. I promise. Scout licked his hand. Robert started the car and drove home. Mrs. Patterson was watering her roses when Robert pulled into his driveway. She was 73, widowed, and the kind of neighbor who noticed everything but only spoke when it mattered. When she saw Scout jump out of Robert's truck, her her watering can clattered to the ground. "Robert? Is that?" "It's Scout," Robert confirmed. Mrs. Patterson came over, ignoring the water soaking into her flower beds. She knelt carefully and let Scout sniff her hand. "I thought he was gone," Patricia said. Patricia said a lot of things. Something in Robert's tone made Mrs. Patterson look up sharply. She'd known Robert and Margaret for 20 years. She'd brought casseroles after Margaret died. She'd called 911 when Robert collapsed. She knew when to ask questions and when to just listen. "Come over for tea tomorrow," she said quietly. "Both of you." That night, Robert set up Scout's old bed in the bedroom, the same spot it had occupied when Margaret was alive. Scout circled it 3 times and lay down, his eyes never leaving Robert's face. "I know," Robert said softly. "I miss her too." At 2 a.m., Robert woke to find Scout pressed against his side, shaking. Nightmares. Or memories. Hard to tell the difference. "It's okay," Robert whispered, running his hand along Scout's back. "You're home. You're safe. I've got you." Scout's breathing slowly steadied. In the darkness, Robert made a decision. The next morning, he called an attorney. "I need to update my will," Robert said. "And I need to establish a pet trust. Something ironclad. Something that guarantees Scout will be taken care of, with resources and oversight, no matter what happens to me." The attorney, Richard Chen, had handled Margaret's estate. He understood. "Who do you want as the primary caregiver?" Robert hesitated. The obvious answer was Patricia. But Patricia had already proven she couldn't be trusted with that responsibility. She'd made one choice out of fear and convenience, and it had nearly cost Scout his life. "I don't know yet," Robert admitted. "But I need it set up so that whoever takes him has financial support and legal accountability. I need to make sure he's not just given away again." "I can do that," Richard said. "But Robert, a trust like this requires funding. Do you have assets set aside?" Robert thought about his savings account, his military pension, the life insurance policy Margaret had insisted he keep. Money he'd been planning to leave to Patricia. "Yes," he said. "I have assets." When Mrs. Patterson came over that afternoon with tea and homemade cookies, she found Robert at the kitchen table surrounded by legal documents and photographs of Margaret. Scout was at his feet, calm and watchful. "You're planning for after," Mrs. Patterson said gently. It wasn't a question. "I have to." She sat down across from him, her weathered hands wrapping around her teacup. "Patricia called me yesterday. She's very upset. She should be. She's also very sorry. And very scared." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were kind but direct. "She made a terrible mistake, Robert. But it came from love, not malice. She watched her mother die slowly. Then she almost lost you too." When Scout started grieving, Patricia panicked. "She thought she was saving you both from more pain. She was wrong." "Yes," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "She was. But people make wrong choices when they're drowning in grief. You know that better than anyone." Robert looked at Scout, who had moved to sit beside him, leaning his weight against Robert's leg. "She gave up on him. Twice. Maybe." Mrs. Patterson took a careful sip of tea. "Or maybe she didn't know how to ask for help. Didn't know how to admit she'd made a mistake. Fear makes us do foolish things, Robert. Even to the people, and animals, we love most." Robert didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Mrs. Patterson reached across the table and touched his hand. "Don't make decisions out of anger. You don't have much time left, don't waste it on grudges. If you want Scout protected, really protected, you need to face the truth. Patricia loves that dog too. She just doesn't know how to show it yet." After she left, Robert sat with that truth for a long time. Patricia came over 3 days later. She stood on the porch looking smaller than Robert remembered, 42 years old but somehow childlike in her uncertainty. Scout saw her first. His reaction was complicated. Not the joyful reunion he'd had with Robert. But not rejection either. Wariness. Hurt. But also, recognition. Patricia's eyes filled when she saw him. "Hi, Scout," she whispered. Scout stayed at Robert's side but his tail moved. Just once. Tentative. "Come in," Robert said. They sat in the living room, the same room where Margaret had spent her final days, where Scout had learned to be gentle with fragile things. Patricia couldn't stop looking at Scout, and Scout couldn't stop watching her with that cautious, wounded expression. "I need to explain," Patricia started. "Yes," Robert said. "You do." The story came out in pieces. After the Hendersons called Patricia 2 months in, admitting they couldn't handle Scout's depression, Patricia had panicked. She'd picked Scout up, brought him to her apartment, tried to care for him herself. But her landlord didn't allow pets. Her schedule was chaos. Her kids were overwhelmed by Scout's neediness, his constant vigilance, his obvious trauma. I told myself it was temporary, Patricia said, her voice breaking. That I'd figure something out. I took him to Dr. Singh for his shots. I tried. But Dad, I was drowning. Work was insane, the kids needed me, and Scout wouldn't settle. He'd wait by the door every day, watching, and I knew. I knew he was waiting for you or Mom, and I couldn't. Her voice fractured completely. I couldn't be enough for him. And I couldn't bring him back to you because you were still so sick, and the doctors said stress could kill you, and I thought, she looked up, tears streaming. I thought if he was gone, really gone, you'd both finally be able to move on. So you surrendered him, Robert said quietly. I drove 40 miles away. Gave a fake name. Paid cash. I told them he was a stray so they couldn't trace him back to you or me. I thought maybe a new family, people who didn't know about Margaret or your heart attack, maybe they could give him a fresh start. Make him happy again. He almost died, Patricia. I know. She buried her face in her hands. I know. I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping, but I was just running away from the guilt and the grief and the impossible choice between you and him. It wasn't a choice, Robert interrupted. His voice was hard. Controlled. You decided it was a choice, but it wasn't. Scout was family. You don't abandon family when things get hard. Patricia nodded, sobbing now. I know. You're right. I failed both of you. Scout had moved closer during this exchange, drawn by Patricia's distress despite his own hurt. He sat between them now, head swiveling back and forth, trying to understand. Robert watched his daughter cry. Watched Scout's concern. And remembered Mrs. Patterson's words, don't waste your time on grudges. I've set up a trust, Robert said finally. For Scout. When I die, he'll have financial support and legal protection. But he'll need more than money. He'll need someone who won't give up on him when it's hard. Someone who understands what he's been through and honors it instead of trying to erase it. Patricia looked up, understanding dawning. Dad, I need to know you can do that, Patricia. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. But because you love him enough to do the hard work. I do, Patricia whispered. I love him. I always did. I just got scared. Scared doesn't excuse it. But scared can learn. Robert leaned forward. Scout's not a problem to solve, Patricia. He's a soul that's been traumatized. If you take him when I'm gone, and that's an if, you need to understand that he comes with grief. With needs. With memories that matter. You don't get to erase his past for convenience. I won't, Patricia said. I promise. I'll do better. I'll be better. Robert looked at Scout, who was watching both of them with those two intelligent eyes. Show me. Starting now. Visit us. Learn his routines. Prove you can handle the commitment. Patricia nodded, wiping her face. Can I touch him? Ask him, Robert said. Not me. Him. Patricia knelt on the floor. Slowly, carefully, she extended her hand. Scout? I'm sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry. Can we start over? Scout looked at Robert, seeking permission or reassurance. Robert nodded slightly. Scout stepped forward. Sniffed Patricia's hand. Then, tentatively, he pressed his head against her palm. Patricia broke down completely, wrapping her arms around him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I won't leave you again. I promise. And Scout, damaged and wary but still capable of forgiveness, leaned into her embrace. 7 months later, Robert died the way Margaret had, quietly, at home, surrounded by love. Patricia was there. Scout was there. Mrs. Patterson brought flowers. Robert's last words were to Scout, good boy. You did so good. You loved us so well. Now let Patricia love you. Be happy, Scout. You deserve to be happy. Scout didn't howl this time. He understood. He pressed his face to Robert's hand until the very end, then lay down beside the bed and waited with the patience of a dog who'd already learned that grief was survivable if you weren't alone. Patricia kept her promise. Scout moved into her house, a real house now, not the apartment. One with a yard. Patricia's kids learned his commands, honor guard, find comfort, at ease. They learned that Scout had nightmares sometimes. That he watched doors too carefully. That he loved being read to because Margaret used to read to him. They didn't erase his past. They honored it. Scout slept in Patricia's daughter's room at night, but every morning he'd make his rounds, checking on everyone, making sure his new family was safe. He'd pause at the shelf where Patricia kept a photograph of Robert and Margaret, Scout a tiny puppy between them. Mrs. Patterson visited weekly. She'd bring cookies and sit with Scout in the sunlight, telling him stories about Robert and Margaret, keeping their memory alive not through grief but through love. And slowly, carefully, Scout began to trust again. Not the desperate, terrified trust of a dog who'd been abandoned too many times. but the steady, earned trust of a soul that had survived loss and found home again. 1 year after Robert died, Patricia took Scout back to the shelter. Not to surrender him. To visit. Jennifer cried when she saw them. Dr. Chun did too. He looks good, Carol said, kneeling to scratch Scout's ears. Happy. He is, Patricia confirmed. And it was true. Scout was older now, less puppy and more settled companion. But his eyes were bright. Alert. He leaned into Carol's touch and then looked up at Patricia with perfect trust. Your father would be proud, Jennifer said softly. Patricia's throat tightened. I hope so. On the drive home, Patricia thought about everything Scout had survived. 2 losses. 2 abandonments. Depression so severe he'd stopped eating. The long, dark weeks in Kennel 7 waiting for someone who'd never forget him. He'd survived because love, real love, refuses to let go. Even when it hurts. Even when it fails. Even when it dies. Love persists. Scout pressed his nose against the car window, watching the world pass by, and Patricia reached over to rest her hand on his back. We're going home, buddy. You and me. We're going home. Scout's tail wagged. He knew the way.